Why you always feel like you're missing out. FOMO explained. You're scrolling through your phone, and suddenly it hits you. Everyone else seems to be traveling more, earning more, laughing more, living more. Even if your own day was perfectly fine, something still feels off, like you're on the outside of a life that's happening without you. That uneasy pull has a name: FOMO. What FOMO actually is? FOMO, short for fear of missing out, is the anxious feeling that other people are experiencing something rewarding, exciting, or meaningful without you. It is more than simple jealousy or curiosity. It is a psychological response rooted in the human need for connection, belonging, and social validation. At its core, FOMO is the fear that your life is somehow less fulfilling compared to the lives of others. Most people experience FOMO in everyday situations. You might see friends hanging out without you, coworkers celebrating achievements, or strangers online traveling, dating, and succeeding. Even if you were content moments earlier, suddenly you begin questioning your own life. Am I doing enough? Am I falling behind? Should I be somewhere else right now? These thoughts are what give FOMO its emotional power. Psychologically, FOMO is closely connected to social comparison. Human beings naturally evaluate themselves by observing others. This behavior once helped people stay socially connected and aware of opportunities within their communities. But in modern life, especially with social media, comparison has become constant. Instead of comparing yourself to a few people around you, you are now exposed to hundreds of carefully selected moments from countless lives every single day. What makes FOMO especially powerful is that the brain often mistakes highlights for reality. Social media platforms are designed to showcase exciting experiences, achievements, beauty, relationships, and entertainment. Rarely do people post boredom, loneliness, stress, or routine struggles. As a result, your brain begins to believe that excitement is normal for everyone else while your own ordinary moments feel inadequate by comparison. FOMO also affects the brain chemically. When you see something desirable happening elsewhere, the brain's dopamine system becomes activated. Dopamine is linked to reward, motivation, and anticipation. But instead of satisfaction, FOMO creates a feeling of deprivation. You become aware of a rewarding experience, while simultaneously feeling excluded from it. This can trigger repeated behaviors such as checking notifications, scrolling through feeds, or constantly updating apps in search of connection or reassurance. Not everyone experiences FOMO with the same intensity. It tends to be stronger in people who feel uncertain about their identity, goals, or life direction. When someone is already questioning their progress or happiness, outside comparisons become more emotionally significant. Other people's visible success can begin to feel like evidence of personal failure, even when the comparison is unfair or unrealistic. One of the biggest misconceptions about FOMO is that it means you are actually missing out on something extraordinary. In reality, much of the feeling comes from perception rather than reality. Most lives are filled with ordinary routines, quiet moments, and personal struggles that remain invisible online. FOMO grows when people compare their complete, unedited lives to the polished highlights of others. Ultimately, FOMO is less about missing events and more about seeking reassurance. It reflects a deeper fear of not living correctly, not maximizing opportunities, or not measuring up socially. Understanding this is important because it reveals that FOMO is not proof that your life is lacking. It is often a distorted response, created by constant comparison. The more you recognize how selective and incomplete those comparisons are, the less control FOMO tends to have over your emotions. How social media supercharges it. FOMO existed long before smartphones and social media, but modern platforms have amplified it to a level never seen before. In the past, people mainly compared themselves to close friends, neighbors, classmates, or co-workers. Those comparisons were limited by time and proximity. Today, social media exposes people to a nonstop stream of carefully selected moments from hundreds or even thousands of lives at once. The result is a constant sense that something more exciting, successful, or meaningful is always happening somewhere else. One of the main reasons social media intensifies FOMO is because it shows people's highlight reels, rather than their complete reality. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, and Facebook are designed around visibility and presentation. People naturally post moments that appear interesting, attractive, entertaining, or successful. Vacations, parties, achievements, relationships, luxury purchases, and personal milestones dominate the feed. Because these moments attract attention and engagement, ordinary experiences working, feeling stressed, being lonely, doing chores, or simply having an uneventful day are usually left out. The brain often fails to fully recognize this selectiveness. Instead of seeing social media as edited storytelling, people subconsciously absorb it as evidence of how others normally live. After scrolling through dozens of exciting images and videos, your own routine life can begin to feel dull or incomplete by comparison. Even when you logically understand that social media is curated, emotionally it can still create the impression that everyone else is happier, busier, and more fulfilled than you are. Another reason social media strengthens FOMO is its endless accessibility. Unlike older forms of media, social platforms never really stop. There is always another story, post, update, or notification waiting to be checked. This creates a constant awareness of what other people are doing in real time. Seeing friends together without you, coworkers celebrating achievements, or strangers traveling and succeeding can trigger feelings of exclusion almost instantly. Even a quiet evening at home can suddenly feel inadequate after a few minutes of scrolling. Algorithms also play a major role. Social media platforms are designed to maximize attention and engagement, meaning they prioritize emotionally stimulating content. Posts that create excitement, envy, curiosity, or admiration are more likely to appear repeatedly in your feed. The more emotionally reactive you become, the more likely you are to continue scrolling. In this way, platforms unintentionally train users to stay focused on comparison and external validation. Social media also creates the illusion that opportunities are constantly passing by. Every event, trend, achievement, or experience becomes highly visible and publicly documented. Instead of simply missing one gathering or one opportunity, people feel as though they are missing countless experiences every day. This creates psychological pressure to stay connected at all times, because disconnecting can feel like falling behind socially or culturally. One of the most damaging effects of social media-driven FOMO is that it changes how people evaluate their own lives. Instead of asking, "Am I personally satisfied?" many begin asking, "Does my life look as exciting as everyone else's?" Happiness becomes measured through visibility and comparison, rather than genuine experience. This can lead to chronic dissatisfaction, even when someone's real life is stable and meaningful. Ultimately, social media supercharges FOMO because it turns comparison into a nonstop activity. It compresses thousands of selective moments into a single feed and presents them as everyday reality. The more often people consume these idealized snapshots, the easier it becomes to feel as though life is happening somewhere else. In truth, most people are simply sharing their best moments while hiding the ordinary ones. The problem is not that others are constantly living extraordinary lives. It is that social media makes ordinary life seem invisible. The brain's reward system is involved. FOMO is often described as an emotional experience, but it is also deeply connected to the brain's reward system. The uneasy feeling of missing out is not simply a thought. It is tied to neurological processes that influence motivation, attention, and behavior. When people constantly check their phones, refresh social media feeds, or feel compelled to stay updated on what others are doing, the brain's chemistry is playing a major role in keeping that cycle active. At the center of this process is dopamine, a neurotransmitter strongly connected to reward and anticipation. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical, but its real function is more closely tied to motivation and expectation. It helps the brain pay attention to potentially rewarding experiences and encourages behaviors that might lead to social, emotional, or physical rewards. In other words, dopamine is less about satisfaction itself and more about the pursuit of satisfaction. Social media and modern digital platforms are highly effective at activating this system. Every notification, message, like, or update represents the possibility of something socially rewarding. Your brain begins to associate checking your phone with the chance of receiving connection, validation, entertainment, or important information. This creates anticipation, which triggers dopamine release. Over time, the brain learns to repeatedly seek these small bursts of stimulation. FOMO becomes powerful when the brain detects rewarding experiences happening elsewhere. For example, seeing friends at an event, watching someone celebrate an achievement, or viewing exciting travel. Content signals that something socially valuable is occurring. The brain interprets these moments as opportunities connected to status, belonging, or pleasure. However, instead of participating in the reward, you are only observing it from the outside. This creates a psychological gap between what you are experiencing and what you believe you could be experiencing. That gap is important because the brain is highly sensitive to perceived exclusion. Human beings evolved as social creatures who depended on groups for survival and safety. Being left out historically carried real consequences, so the brain developed systems that closely monitor social belonging. FOMO taps directly into this mechanism. Even though missing a social event today is rarely dangerous, the brain can still react as though exclusion threatens connection or importance within a group. This neurological response helps explain why FOMO can feel difficult to ignore. The brain treats uncertainty itself as uncomfortable. If you do not know what others are doing, your mind may feel compelled to check for updates simply to reduce uncertainty. Scrolling through social media temporarily satisfies this need by providing information, but it often creates new comparisons and new feelings of inadequacy. As a result, the brain becomes trapped in a loop of checking, comparing, and reacting. Another factor, the unpredictability of rewards on digital platforms. Not every notification or post produces the same emotional reaction. Sometimes there is exciting news, social validation, or an entertaining content, and other times there is nothing particularly rewarding. Psychologically, unpredictable rewards are especially effective at reinforcing behavior because the brain never knows when something stimulating will appear. It keeps checking repeatedly. This pattern is similar to the way slot machines maintain attention through inconsistent rewards. Over time, this process can reshape habits and attention spans. People may begin checking their phones automatically during quiet moments, boredom, or anxiety. The behavior no longer feels fully intentional because the brain has learned to associate digital connection with emotional relief and stimulation. Unfortunately, while these behaviors may reduce uncertainty temporarily, they often increase stress and dissatisfaction over the long term. Understanding the brain's reward system helps explain why FOMO feels so persistent and emotionally intense. It is not simply weakness, insecurity, or a lack of self-control. Modern digital environments are specifically designed to capture attention and activate the brain's motivational systems. FOMO grows stronger because the brain continuously interprets social information as meaningful, rewarding, and urgent. Recognizing this can help people understand that their reactions are deeply human even if the comparisons themselves are often distorted. Why it hits some people harder. Not everyone experiences FOMO in the same way. Some people can scroll through social media, see others traveling, succeeding, or socializing, and feel little emotional impact. Others, however, feel intense anxiety, self-doubt, or dissatisfaction almost immediately. The difference often comes down to personality, emotional security, life circumstances, and the way individuals evaluate themselves in relation to others. One major factor is self-esteem. People who already feel confident and secure in their identity are generally less vulnerable to comparison. They may still notice what others are doing, but they are less likely to interpret those experiences as evidence that something is wrong with their own lives. In contrast, individuals with lower self-esteem often use external information to judge their personal worth. Seeing someone else succeed or appear happy can quickly trigger thoughts such as "I'm behind," "I'm not doing enough," or "everyone else has life figured out except me." Uncertainty about life direction also makes FOMO much stronger. During periods of transition such as changing careers, ending relationships, starting adulthood, or feeling unsure about the future, people naturally look outward for reassurance. Social comparison becomes a way of measuring progress. If someone else appears more successful, confident, or fulfilled, it can intensify feelings of confusion or insecurity. The less certain people feel internally, the more powerful outside comparisons become. Anxiety plays an important role as well. People who are naturally anxious tend to think more about possibilities, risks, and missed opportunities. Their brains are often highly sensitive to uncertainty and exclusion. FOMO feeds directly into these concerns because it creates the impression that important experiences, relationships, or opportunities are constantly happening elsewhere. For anxious individuals, missing out can feel emotionally significant even when the event itself is relatively unimportant. Social needs and personality traits also influence FOMO intensity. Highly social people often place greater emotional value on belonging, inclusion, and participation. Being left out of social activities or conversations may feel especially painful, because social connection forms a large part of their identity. Introverted individuals can experience FOMO too, but they may be less emotionally dependent on constant participation in social environments. Another reason some people experience stronger FOMO is perfectionism. Perfectionists often hold unrealistic expectations about how life should look and feel. They may believe they should always be maximizing opportunities, making the best decisions, and living meaningful experiences. Social media reinforces these pressures by presenting endless examples of people who appear successful, productive, attractive, or adventurous. Perfectionists can become trapped in the belief that they are wasting time or failing to live optimally compared to others. Age and life stage matter as well. Younger people, especially teenagers and young adults, often experience stronger FOMO because identity formation and social belonging are central during those years. Peer approval and comparison carry more emotional weight while individuals are still developing confidence and stability. Constant digital connection intensifies this process because social feedback becomes immediate and continuous. Past experiences can also shape sensitivity to FOMO. People who have experienced rejection, exclusion, loneliness, or social isolation may become more alert to signs of being left out. Even small social situations can trigger deeper emotional reactions tied to earlier experiences. In these cases, FOMO is not only about the present moment, it is connected to deeper fears about belonging and acceptance. Ultimately, FOMO hits some people harder because it interacts with existing emotional vulnerabilities. It is rarely just about a missed party, vacation, or opportunity. More often, it reflects underlying questions people already carry about themselves. Am I enough? Am I falling behind? Am I living correctly? The stronger those uncertainties are internally, the more emotionally powerful external comparisons become. Understanding this helps explain why FOMO is not simply a social media problem. It is also a reflection of how secure people feel within themselves. The illusion of constant excitement. One of the biggest reasons FOMO feels so powerful is the illusion that everyone else is constantly living exciting, meaningful, and emotionally fulfilling lives. Social media creates the impression that other people are always traveling, socializing, achieving goals, falling in love, attending events, and experiencing unforgettable moments. When people repeatedly consume these images and stories, ordinary life can begin to feel disappointing by comparison. The problem is that this perception is deeply distorted. In reality, most human life is repetitive and routine-based. The majority of people spend much of their time working, studying, commuting, resting, cleaning, handling responsibilities, or simply going through ordinary days. Moments of excitement exist, but they are occasional rather than constant. Social media, however, filters out the routine and concentrates attention almost entirely on highlights. What appears online is not continuous reality, it is selective storytelling. This selectiveness changes the way people interpret their own experiences. When someone compares their everyday life to other people's most exciting moments, they begin using an unrealistic standard for happiness. Quiet evenings, normal routines, and slow progress can suddenly feel inadequate because they are being measured against curated snapshots of extraordinary experiences. Over time, this creates the false belief that a meaningful life should always feel stimulating, productive, or visually impressive. Part of the illusion comes from the sheer volume of content people consume. Even if each individual only posts a few exciting moments per month, social media combines the highlights of hundreds or thousands of people into one endless feed. The brain processes this stream as though extraordinary experiences are happening constantly everywhere. In reality, you are seeing the best moments from many different lives compressed together. The result is a distorted sense of normality. Another factor is that people naturally avoid displaying boredom, loneliness, stress, or disappointment online. Most individuals want to present themselves positively to others. This is not necessarily dishonest, it is simply human behavior. People share vacations more often than arguments, celebrations more often than insecurities, and achievements more often than failures. As a result, social media becomes heavily biased toward emotional highs. While everyday struggles remain largely invisible, the illusion of constant excitement can also create pressure to turn life into performance. Instead of fully experiencing moments for personal meaning, some people begin evaluating experiences based on how impressive they appear to others. Activities become less about enjoyment and more about visibility. A vacation, dinner, or event can feel incomplete if it is not documented, posted, or validated online. In this way, social media shifts attention away from genuine presence and toward external perception. This distorted environment affects emotional expectations as well. People begin believing that happiness should feel constant and dramatic, rather than quiet and stable. Ordinary emotions, such as boredom, uncertainty, or loneliness start to seem abnormal, even though they are natural parts of human life. When reality inevitably feels less exciting than the online world, dissatisfaction grows. Many individuals conclude that something is wrong with their lives, when they are actually experiencing normal human routines. The truth is that excitement is only a small part of life. Even for the people who appear constantly fulfilled online, behind every polished image are unshared moments of stress, insecurity, fatigue, and ordinary repetition. Social media rarely captures those realities because they are not designed for attention or admiration. Ultimately, the illusion of constant excitement fuels FOMO by convincing people that they are missing a version of life that barely exists in reality. What people envy is often not another person's actual daily experience, but a carefully edited narrative shaped for visibility. Understanding this difference is important because it helps separate genuine fulfillment from the performance of fulfillment. Most people are not constantly living extraordinary lives. They are simply posting extraordinary moments from otherwise ordinary ones. How FOMO becomes a habit loop. FOMO does not usually stay as a temporary emotion. Over time, it can develop into a repeating, psychological and behavioral cycle that reinforces itself. What begins as occasional curiosity about what other people are doing can gradually become a deeply ingrained habit of checking, comparing, and seeking reassurance. The more frequently this cycle repeats, the more automatic it becomes. The process often starts with a feeling of uncertainty or exclusion. A person may wonder if they are missing an important event, falling behind socially, or not making the most of life. Even small moments of boredom, loneliness, or insecurity can trigger this feeling. The brain naturally dislikes uncertainty, especially when it relates to social connection and belonging. To reduce that discomfort, people reach for the quickest source of information available, their phones. Checking social media provides temporary relief because it gives the brain an immediate sense of awareness and connection. Notifications, updates, stories, and posts make people feel informed about what is happening around them. In that moment, uncertainty decreases slightly. However, the relief rarely lasts long. Instead of reassurance, people often encounter images of parties, achievements, vacations, relationships, or experiences that trigger new comparisons. Suddenly, the original feeling of uncertainty becomes even stronger. This creates a repeating cycle. You feel left out or uncertain gives you check your phone gives. You see more evidence of exciting things happening elsewhere gives. You feel worse gives you check again. Over time, the brain begins learning this pattern through reinforcement. Even though scrolling may increase dissatisfaction overall, it still provides small moments of stimulation and temporary emotional relief. Psychologically, behaviors that reduce uncertainty even briefly are likely to be repeated. This is how FOMO shifts from an occasional feeling into a habit loop. One reason the cycle becomes so powerful is because digital platforms are designed around intermittent rewards. Not every scroll produces something emotionally significant, but occasionally there is a highly rewarding moment, a message, exciting update, social interaction, or an entertaining post. The unpredictability keeps the brain engaged. Since people never know when the next rewarding experience will appear, they continue checking repeatedly. This is the same psychological principle that makes gambling systems addictive. Unpredictable rewards strengthen compulsive behavior. As the loop continues, checking social media can become automatic rather than intentional. Many people unlock their phones without consciously deciding to do so. Quiet moments, boredom, stress, or discomfort immediately trigger the urge to scroll. The behavior starts functioning like a reflex because the brain has associated digital checking with emotional regulation. The habit loop also strengthens comparison thinking. The more often someone checks social media during moments of insecurity, the more the brain learns to evaluate self-worth through external information, instead of focusing on personal goals, values, or experiences. People become increasingly focused on how their lives compare to others. This creates chronic dissatisfaction, because there will always appear to be someone doing more, achieving more, or experiencing more excitement. Another problem is that the cycle often interrupts presence in real life. People become mentally focused on what they might be missing elsewhere, instead of engaging fully with what is happening in front of them. Even enjoyable experiences can feel incomplete if attention is constantly divided by digital comparison and monitoring. What makes the FOMO habit loop especially difficult is that it disguises itself as connection. Checking social media feels productive because it creates the illusion of staying informed and socially involved. In reality, excessive comparison often increases anxiety, restlessness, and emotional exhaustion. The brain keeps searching for reassurance, but rarely feels fully satisfied. Ultimately, FOMO becomes a habit loop because the brain learns to associate constant checking with temporary emotional relief. The cycle is reinforced every time uncertainty leads to scrolling, and scrolling leads to comparison. Understanding this pattern is important because it reveals that FOMO is not simply a random emotion. It is a learned behavioral cycle shaped by attention, technology, and the brain's desire for social certainty. FOMO is not really about missing events, opportunities, or experiences. It about the fear that your life is somehow falling behind everyone else's. Social media, constant comparison, and the brain's need for connection combine to create the illusion that other people are always happier, more successful, and more fulfilled. But what we usually compare ourselves to is not reality. It is a collection of carefully selected highlights that hide the ordinary parts of life everyone experiences. The more people rely on comparison to measure their worth, the stronger FOMO becomes. Over time, the brain can turn checking, scrolling, and comparing into a habit loop that increases anxiety instead of satisfaction. Yet the feeling itself is not proof that something is wrong with your life. It is often a distorted response created by uncertainty, insecurity, and constant exposure to idealized images of other people's experiences. In reality, meaningful lives are not built from nonstop excitement. Most people spend the majority of their time in routines, quiet moments, and ordinary experiences that never appear online. Real fulfillment is usually personal, gradual, and invisible to others. The problem with FOMO is that it convinces people to overlook their own lives while chasing the appearance of someone else's. Understanding FOMO changes the way we respond to it. Instead of treating comparison as evidence that we are failing, we can recognize it as a natural, psychological reaction amplified by modern technology. The goal is not to completely eliminate comparison that is part of being human, but to stop allowing it to define our value or direction. Ultimately, FOMO fades when people stop measuring their lives against edited fragments of other people's realities. The more attention you give to your own experiences, relationships, and values, the less power outside comparison begins to hold. A meaningful life is not about keeping up with everyone else. It is about being fully present in the one you are already living.